Welcome back. Today we're doing a deep dive into the U.S. federal government shutdown that started October 1st, 2025. Fiscal year 2026 kicking off with a bang, huh?
Yeah, not the kind of bang anyone really wants, though.
No, definitely not. Our mission here is just to get you up to speed quickly. Because look, this isn't your typical budget squabble. The first reports, they're pretty grim.
Partial shutdown, right. Because they couldn't pass a continuing resolution, a CR, before the deadline.
Exactly. And that means something like 750,000 federal workers furloughed immediately. Plus an economic hit. What was it? Around $400 million a day, just in lost pay.
Yeah, that's the estimate. But what's really striking, I think, is how different this feels from, say, the 2018 or 2019 shutdowns. Those were mostly about specific funding levels. Remember the border wall?
Right, it was a dollar figure fight.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This time, it's about these really dug-in policy disputes, mostly around social benefits, healthcare, that kind of thing.
Which means?
Well, it means the risks of this dragging on, maybe even beating that 35-day record shutdown. It seems unusually high this time around. Policy fights are just harder to compromise on than numbers sometimes.
Okay. So if it's not just about the dollars, let's unpack that. What is the core policy fight that actually stopped that short-term CR?
Well, it really boils down to this fundamental disagreement about programs that are set to expire. You had the administration and the GOP pushing for what they termed a clean CR.
Meaning just
Yeah.
keep funding at last year's levels, FY 2025.
Pretty much, yeah. But here's the catch. That clean approach, it wasn't really neutral. It was, you could argue, a kind of policy weapon in itself.
How so?
Because by not acting, by just keeping things level, it automatically lets those big Enhanced Affordable Care Act subsidies just expire, the ones that got boosted during the COVID pandemic. They just run out at the end of 2025 if nobody does anything.
Okay. So inaction was the action, leading to a policy change they wanted. So how did the Democrats counter that if the GOP strategy was just to run out the clock?
Right, they couldn't just let that happen. They used the Senate rules, the 60-vote requirement to get things done. They blocked the CR.
And their demand was?
Their demand was specific policy writers. They wanted language explicitly extending those ACA subsidies and reversing some earlier cuts to Medicaid funding. They basically said, you want funding, you have to address these healthcare policies first. Appropriations hostage taking, essentially.
Okay, so that explains the legislative gridlock.
Yeah.
But then it gets, even more interesting, maybe. Our sources started pointing towards the administration, not just, dealing with the shutdown, but maybe using it strategically.
Yeah, that's a pretty extraordinary suggestion, but there's some concerning evidence. The Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, under Director Russ Vought, who, has ties to that Project 2025 blueprint.
Right, I remember that connection.
Well, OMB started putting out these explicit threats, talking about widespread reductions in force RIS.
Which means permanent layoffs, not just temporary.
Exactly, permanent layoffs. And the implication, or what some sources suggest, is that the shutdown itself was being used as cover, as a tool to achieve some of those deeper ideological goals, dismantling programs related to civil rights, climate, DEI, things they likely couldn't get through Congress legislatively.
Wow. So sort of weaponizing the crisis itself to reshape the government from within. Okay, so if that's the political game theory, what about the real-world impact on you, the listener, relying on these services?
Well, the good news, sort of, is that some things keep running. Social Security checks still go out because they're funded differently through trust funds. The post office keeps running. But the actual administration of government services, that grinds to a halt in many places.
And that creates hidden problems.
Big ones. We call it the silent backlog. Think about the Social Security Administration. The staff who process new claims or appeals or handle hearings for disability insurance, SSDI, they're largely furloughed.
So people needing help just wait longer.
Months longer? Potentially. It creates this massive, enduring backlog that really hurts vulnerable people who are waiting for income they desperately need. It doesn't make headlines like the shutdown itself, but the impact is severe and long-lasting.
And we absolutely have to talk about the money again, but from a different angle. The fairness or unfairness of who bears the cost.
Right, because direct federal employees, the ones furloughed, they're actually guaranteed back pay now. That's thanks to the Government Employee Fair Treatment Act passed after the 2019 shutdown.
Okay, so they eventually get paid for the time they were forced off work. But what about contractors?
That's the rub. There are an estimated, 4.1 million government contractors. Their companies might lose contracts or pause work. And those workers, they typically get nothing. No back pay.
So that $400 million a day in lost compensation we mentioned, a huge chunk of that is just gone. Permanently lost wages for a workforce that's often less financially secure to begin with.
Exactly. It basically externalizes the economic pain onto private sector workers.
So summing this all up, this 2025 shutdown, it's really a story of extreme political polarization, manifesting not just as a budget fight, but as a fight over core policies, amplified by some pretty aggressive administrative tactics.
That's a good way to put it. And getting out of it, it requires one side, or maybe both, to decide that the political damage, the blame they're getting for services stopping, is worse than giving in on a major policy point. It's a high-stakes calculation.
So the takeaway for you listening, next time you hear politicians talking about a clean CR, just remember, in today's environment, doing nothing, simply failing to pass funding, can be a really powerful, deliberate policy move in itself. It's leverage.
And it seems like that leverage is here to stay. The way this will likely get resolved, probably not by just tweaking spending numbers. It'll likely involve trading a major policy goal like saving those ACA subsidies or restoring Medicaid funds. It basically cements this idea of appropriations hostage-taking as just how things get done or undone in Washington now.